Deep in the mountains, where ancient stone swallowed all sound and silver chains bound the impossible, a woman made a choice that would shatter kingdoms. She fed a monster everyone feared. She spoke to a beast no one pitied. Maren Eloan faced that choice every single day for months. And when those chains finally broke, the creature that emerged would claim her as his own. This is the story of how mercy became destiny, and how one act of kindness awakened an alpha king. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's get to the story. The Iron Root Bastion stood carved into the spine of the northern mountains, a monument to humanity's desperation and determination to survive. Its walls were built from stone quarried from the mountain itself, reinforced with iron and etched with protective runes that had been renewed generation after generation. This was the fortress that had held the line when war between humans and the Leaken clans had nearly consumed the world. Though the battles had ceased and an uneasy peace now governed the borderlands, the bastion remained vigilant, its soldiers still carrying silver weapons not because they needed them, but because they refused to forget what forgetting might cost. In the lowest depths of this fortress, where mountain stone pressed close and no torch could fully banish the darkness, there existed a series of containment cells built for a single purpose. These cells were designed to hold lichens, with walls reinforced by moon-touched silver and chains forged in fires blessed by human priests. The air here was thick with dampness and despair, heavy with the weight of suffering that had soaked into the very stones. This was a place that mercy had abandoned long ago, where the imprisoned were left to waste away in silence. It was here, in the deepest of these forsaken cells, that a wolf had been kept prisoner for 5 months. The wolf was enormous, even in his weakened and restrained state. His fur was a pale ash-gray streaked with black that seemed to shift and change in the flickering torchlight, sometimes appearing silver, sometimes dark as storm clouds. His eyes were the color of molten amber, burning with an inner light that the darkness of the dungeon could not diminish. He was easily the size of a warhorse, his body built with a predator's elegant power that even silver chains and starvation could not entirely suppress. There was something about him that commanded attention, an aura of authority that made even the most hardened guards hesitate before approaching his cell. The guards who drew dungeon duty descended with reluctance, never staying longer than absolutely necessary, and never approaching closer than the bars required. They would slide his meager rations through the gap at the bottom of the cell and retreat quickly, fear written plainly across their faces. Nobody in the bastion knew who the wolf truly was. To the soldiers and commanders, he was simply Subject 11, another Leaken captured during a border skirmish, another enemy to be contained until they decided what final purpose he might serve. The fortress commander occasionally spoke of making an example of him, of a public execution that would send a message to any Leaken who dared cross into human territory. But for now, the wolf simply languished in his chains, slowly dying, forgotten by everyone in the fortress. Everyone except the woman assigned to feed him. Maren Eloan was 25 years old and worked in the kitchens of the Iron Root Bastion. She was an orphan. Her village burned to ash in a border conflict when she was barely old enough to remember her parents' faces. The Bastion had taken her in as it took in many war orphans, putting her to work in exchange for food and shelter. Over the years, she had found her place among the cooking fires and herb gardens, her gentle nature and skill with healing plants making her valuable despite her quiet demeanor. The work was hard and the pay barely enough to survive on, but Maren was grateful simply to have a place to belong. 3 months ago, the head cook had assigned Maren the task that no one else in the kitchens wanted. She was to take food to the Leaken prisoner in the dungeons. It was work that everyone avoided with whispered excuses and poorly concealed fear. The dungeons were dark and cold, and the chained wolf terrified even those who knew it could not possibly reach them through iron bars and silver bonds. But Maren had accepted the assignment without complaint, as she accepted all her duties. The first time Maren descended those spiral stone stairs into the depths, carrying a wooden bowl of stale bread and thin broth, her heart hammered so violently in her chest that she thought she might faint before reaching the bottom. Every story she had heard since childhood painted lichens as soulless creatures, nightmares given flesh, monsters who killed without thought or mercy. Her hands trembled as she walked deeper into the mountain's heart, each step taking her further from light and safety. But when she finally reached the cell at the end of the corridor and saw the creature chained within, what flooded through her was not the terror she had expected. It was compassion. The wolf lay on the bare stone floor, and even in the dim light, Maren could see the agony etched into every line of his body. The silver chains binding his neck and hind legs glowed faintly where they touched his skin, leaving burns that wept and never properly healed. He was painfully thin, his ribs visible beneath his ash-gray fur, his breathing shallow and labored. Despite his suffering, when he raised his massive head to look at her, his amber eyes held a clarity and intelligence that struck her like a physical blow. Maren approached the bars with careful steps, her hands shaking as she set the bowl on the ground and slid it through the gap at the bottom of the cell as she had been instructed. The wolf watched her with those devastating golden eyes, and for a heartbeat, their gazes locked. Maren had expected to see rage, hatred, perhaps the mindless ferocity that the stories promised. But what she saw instead was awareness, deep and unmistakable. She saw intelligence that seemed almost human. And beneath the pain and exhaustion, she thought she glimpsed something that might have been curiosity. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. The wolf's ears twitched slightly at her voice, but he made no move to attack, no sound of aggression. He simply watched her with that same intense, knowing gaze. Maren backed away slowly, then turned and climbed the stairs as quickly as she could without running. Her legs trembled as she emerged into the kitchen's warmth and light, but she could not shake the image of those amber eyes. They followed her through the rest of her day, haunting her thoughts as she chopped vegetables and stirred pots and tried to convince herself that what she had seen was impossible. That night, she dreamed of a fog-shrouded forest and a man with eyes the color of molten gold. And so began a routine that would change everything. A routine that would break chains forged in moonlight and silver. A routine that would awaken an alpha king and bind a human woman to a destiny she never imagined possible. The dreams came every night after that first encounter, growing more vivid and impossible to dismiss as mere imagination. In the beginning, the images were fragmented and hazy. Maren would find herself walking through a forest wrapped in silver moonlight, the trees around her ancient and towering, their branches forming a canopy that filtered the light into dancing shadows. She could hear water running somewhere nearby, could smell earth and pine and something wild that made her heart race. And always, somewhere in the mist that clung to the forest floor, she sensed a presence watching her. But by the end of her first week feeding the wolf, the dreams crystallized into something far more disturbing. The man stepped out of the fog as if he had always been there, waiting for her to finally see him clearly. He was tall and powerfully built, his bare chest marked with scars that looked like they told stories of 100 battles. His hair was black as a raven's wing with silver streaking through it at his temples, and his face was carved with sharp, aristocratic features that commanded attention. But it was his eyes that made Maren's breath catch in her sleeping chest. They were the exact shade of molten amber as the wolf's, burning with the same intense intelligence and something deeper. Recognition. He spoke to her in a language she had never heard before, words that flowed like music and thunder combined. The strange thing, the impossible thing, was that Maren understood every syllable as clearly as if he spoke in her native tongue. "Little healer," he said, his voice resonating through her very bones. "You walk between two worlds now. Be careful where you step." "Who are you?" Maren tried to ask, but her voice came out as barely a whisper in the dream forest. The man's expression softened with something that looked like tenderness. "You already know. Your spirit recognized mine the moment our eyes met." He reached toward her, his hand stopping just short of touching her face. "But there is danger coming. They mean to end what has barely begun. You must be strong, little healer. Stronger than you believe yourself to be." Maren woke with his voice still echoing in her mind, her heart pounding and her skin damp with sweat despite the cold of her small room. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to slow her breathing, trying to convince herself it was only a dream. But she could still smell the forest. Still feel the weight of those amber eyes watching her. The next evening, when Maren descended into the dungeons, she brought more than the usual meager rations. Hidden beneath the bread in her basket were strips of salted meat from her own portion, a small bundle of clean cloth, and herbs from her personal stores. Comfrey for wounds. Calendula for burns. Yarrow to fight infection. The wolf raised his head when she approached, those knowing eyes tracking her every movement. In the torchlight, Maren could see that the silver burns around his neck had worsened, the flesh raw and weeping. Her healer's instincts overrode her caution. "Those chains are killing you slowly," she whispered, kneeling near the bars. "I know you probably can't understand me, but I'm going to try to help. Just, please don't bite me." She soaked a cloth in water mixed with calendula tincture and carefully reached through the bars. Her hand trembled as it passed into the cell, half expecting the wolf to lunge. Instead, he remained perfectly still, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Maren gently dabbed at the burns she could reach through the bars, wincing at how the wolf's body trembled with each touch. But he never growled, never snapped. He simply endured, his amber eyes never leaving her face. "I'm sorry," she murmured again, the words becoming a ritual between them. "I'm so sorry they're doing this to you." This became her new routine. Each night, she would descend with food and her healing supplies, treating what wounds she could reach, speaking softly to fill the oppressive silence of the dungeon. And each night, the wolf watched her with that same devastating awareness, sometimes making soft sounds in his throat that sounded almost like responses. But despite her efforts, Maren could see him growing weaker. 2 weeks into her secret ministrations, one of the guards noticed the change. Maren was climbing the dungeon stairs when she heard his voice echoing from above. "Commander, sir, the Leaken prisoner. Something's different about him." Maren pressed herself against the wall, hidden in the shadows of the stairwell. "What do you mean, different?" The commander's voice was sharp with suspicion. "He's not wasting away as fast as he should be. Still looks half dead, but I don't know, sir. Just seems like he's holding on longer than expected." There was a long pause. Then the commander spoke again, his voice cold and decisive. "It doesn't matter. We've kept him long enough. Prepare for a public execution 3 days from now. We'll make an example of him in the courtyard. Let the Leaken clans see what happens when they cross into our territory." Maren's blood turned to ice. 3 days. She had 3 days. That night, her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the water bowl as she descended the stairs. The wolf must have sensed her distress because he struggled to his feet when she approached, a low whine escaping his throat. "They're going to kill you," Maren whispered, tears burning her eyes. "In 3 days they're going to execute you, and I don't know how to stop them." The wolf pressed against the bars of his cell, as close to her as the silver chains would allow. For the first time, Maren noticed how his breathing had become more labored, how his legs trembled with the effort of standing. He was dying. Maybe not in 3 days, but soon. The silver was poisoning him slowly, burning away his strength day by day. The next evening, Maren's worst fears were realized. When she descended into the dungeon, the wolf was collapsed on the stone floor, his sides heaving with shallow, desperate breaths. His eyes were open but glazed with fever, and the burns from the silver chains had spread, angry red welts covering more of his body than she had ever seen. "No, no, no," Maren breathed, dropping to her knees outside the cell. "Please, not yet. Hold on." But even as she spoke, she knew her herbs and water would not be enough. Not this time. He was too far gone, the silver poisoning too advanced. If she was going to save him, if there was any chance at all, she would have to do the forbidden thing. She would have to enter the cell. Maren's hands trembled as she pulled the heavy iron key from where she had stolen it from the guard station weeks ago. Hidden in her apron for a moment, exactly like this one. The lock was old and stiff, but it turned with a grinding click that sounded impossibly loud in the dungeon's silence. The cell door swung open. For a heartbeat, Maren froze, every warning she had ever heard screaming in her mind. If the wolf attacked, if he had been feigning weakness, she would die here in this forgotten dungeon, and no one would even know until morning. But the wolf did not move. He barely seemed aware that the door had opened. Maren stepped inside. She worked for hours in that cell, cleaning wounds that should have killed him already, and applying poultices with shaking hands, whispering encouragement even though she was certain he could not understand. The wolf's fever burned so hot she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His breathing grew more ragged with each passing minute. "Please," Maren whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't die. I don't even know why it matters so much, but please, stay with me." The wolf's eyes flickered open, finding hers through the haze of fever. And then, with obvious effort, he lifted his massive head and pressed his muzzle weakly into her palm. The gesture was so gentle, so trusting, so heartbreakingly human in its plea that Maren felt something crack open in her chest. This was not a monster. This was not a soulless beast. This was a thinking, feeling being who was suffering, who was dying, who was asking her not to give up on him. "I won't leave you," she promised, her tears falling onto his ash-gray fur. "I won't let you die alone." She stayed until the torches began to gutter, until her back ached and her hands were numb. When she finally forced herself to leave, locking the cell behind her with a heart that felt like it was being torn in two, the wolf's amber eyes followed her to the stairs. That night, the dream was different. The amber-eyed man stood closer than he ever had before, so close she could see the pain etched into every line of his face. His hand reached for her, and this time, he touched her cheek with a tenderness that made her want to weep. "You are saving me, little healer," he whispered, "in ways you cannot yet understand. But the chains are breaking. Can you feel it? Everything is about to change." "I don't understand," Maren said, but even as she spoke, she looked into his eyes and saw the truth she had been denying. The forest faded. The dream dissolved. But when Maren opened her eyes in her dark room, she could still feel the ghost of his touch on her face. The next evening, she descended into the dungeon with her heart in her throat and questions burning on her tongue. The wolf was still weak, still suffering, but his eyes were clearer than they had been the night before. He watched her approach with an intensity that made her breath catch. Maren knelt outside the cell, their eyes meeting through the bars. In the flickering torchlight, she could see it so clearly now. The intelligence, the awareness, the soul looking back at her. And superimposed over the wolf's face like a double image, she saw the man from her dreams. The same eyes, the same presence, the same spirit watching her. "Who are you?" Maren whispered, her voice trembling. The wolf blinked slowly, deliberately. And in that moment, in the weight of that gaze, Maren understood. The man and the wolf were one and the same. And her world would never be the same again. The announcement came the next morning, delivered with cold efficiency by the commander himself as he inspected the kitchens. "The execution will take place in 2 days at dawn," he said, his voice carrying through the sudden silence that fell over the workers. "The Leakin prisoner will be brought to the courtyard and put to death publicly. I want everyone in the fortress in attendance. Let it be a reminder of what we stand against." Maren's hands froze over the bread dough she had been kneading. 2 days. They had moved the execution up by a full day. "Sir," the head cook ventured carefully, "is that wise? The prisoner is barely alive as it is. Wouldn't it be more effective if—" "The decision is made," the commander cut him off. 2 days. Make sure the kitchen staff are present." Maren felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Her vision blurred at the edges, and she gripped the table to keep from swaying. 2 days. 48 hours. And then they would kill him. They would drag the wolf into the courtyard and execute him while the entire fortress watched, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Nothing legal anyway. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Maren went through the motions of her work mechanically, her mind racing through impossible plans and discarding each one as quickly as it formed. She could not fight the guards. She could not open the fortress gates. She had no allies, no resources, no power. All she had was determination and a stolen key. When evening finally came and she descended into the dungeons, her basket was heavier than usual. She had packed every healing herb she owned, extra water, strips of cloth. As if any of it would matter. As if anything could save him now. But when Maren reached the bottom of the stairs and saw the wolf's cell, her heart stopped. He was convulsing. The massive body jerked and spasmed on the stone floor. His limbs twitching violently as if something inside him was trying to claw its way out. The silver chains that bound him blazed with an unnatural white light, so bright it hurt to look at directly. The wolf's mouth was open in a silent scream. His amber eyes wild with agony. No! Maren dropped her basket and ran to the cell, her hands shaking so badly she could barely fit the key into the lock. Hold on, please hold on, I'm coming. The lock clicked open and Maren threw herself into the cell without thought for her own safety. She fell to her knees beside the wolf's trembling body, her hands hovering uselessly over him, not knowing where to touch, how to help. Please don't die, she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Not now, not like this. Please. The wolf's eyes found hers through the haze of pain, and in them she saw something that looked like apology, like goodbye. No. Maren threw her arms around the wolf's massive neck, pressing her face against his ash-gray fur. I won't let you go. Do you hear me? I won't let them take you from me. The moment her body made full contact with his, something changed. The air in the dungeon crackled with energy that made Maren's hair stand on end. The silver chains flared even brighter, their white light now edged with blue, with gold, with colors that had no names. The wolf's convulsions intensified, and Maren felt his body beginning to change beneath her hands. She should have pulled away. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out of the cell before whatever was happening consumed her too. But she could not let go. Would not let go. The sound that filled the dungeon was like nothing Maren had ever heard. It was the crack of breaking stone and the song of wind through ancient trees and the roar of a storm all at once. The wolf's bones began to shift beneath his skin, grinding and reforming with sickening pops that made Maren's stomach turn. His flesh rippled and changed, shrinking in some places, reshaping in others. Magic poured off him in waves so powerful that Maren felt it pressing against her skin like a physical force. This was impossible. No lichen could transform while bound in silver. The metal specifically prevented the change, suppressed the magic that allowed them to shift between forms. But the wolf was transforming anyway. His body arched violently, nearly throwing Maren off, but she clung tighter, her tears mixing with the sweat that suddenly covered both of them. The ash-gray fur began to recede, revealing human skin marked with burns and scars. The massive frame contracted, bones reforming into a shape that was unmistakably human but still radiating an aura of barely contained power. And then, with a sound like a thunderclap that shook the very foundations of the fortress, the silver chains shattered. The metal burst apart in a shower of glowing fragments that flew across the cell, embedding themselves in the stone walls. The pieces that had been burning into the wolf's flesh for 5 months scattered like stars, finally releasing him from their torment. Maren fell backward with the force of the explosion, landing hard on the stone floor. For a moment, she could see nothing but white light, could hear nothing but the ringing in her ears, could feel nothing but the residual magic crackling across her skin. When her vision finally cleared, the wolf was gone. In his place, kneeling on the cold dungeon floor in a tangle of broken silver chains, was a man. He was breathing hard, his broad shoulders heaving with each ragged breath. His hair was black as midnight with silver streaking through it at the temples, falling past his shoulders in wild tangles. His body was covered in burns and scars, evidence of months of torture, but beneath the damage Maren could see the powerful build of a warrior. And when he slowly raised his head to look at her, she found herself staring into eyes the exact shade of molten amber she had come to know so well. "Maren," he said. His voice rough from disuse but unmistakably the same voice that had spoken to her in dreams. He spoke her name like a prayer, like a benediction, like something sacred. "How do you know my name?" The question came out as barely a whisper, Marin's entire body trembling with shock and fear and something else she could not name. The man's lips curved into the ghost of a smile, though pain still etched lines around his eyes. "We are bound, little healer. Through mercy, through spirit, through fate itself. I have known your name since the moment your compassion first touched my dying soul." "I don't understand." Marin pressed herself back against the cell wall, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "This is impossible. You can't transform under silver suppression. No Leakin can. It's impossible. Not for me." The man shifted slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at his burns. "The silver chains bound my body, weakened my magic, trapped me in wolf form so my captors would not know who they held. But they could not break what I am. Could not sever the bond that connected us." "What are you?" Marin breathed. The man's amber eyes held hers steadily, and despite his weakened state, despite the burns covering his body, the sheer presence that radiated from him filled the entire cell. It was the presence of someone born to command, to lead, to rule. "My name is Kavrin Thorn," he said quietly. "Alpha King of the Silver Crest Dominion, ruler of the northern Leakin clans. And these humans who held me prisoner have no idea that the wolf they plan to execute is the one being who could unite my people to war." Marin's breath caught in her throat. Alpha King. The stories she had heard since childhood suddenly crashed over her. The northern Leakin clans were the most powerful supernatural force in the known world, and the Alpha King was a figure of legend. Immortal, invincible, commanding loyalty from every Leakin pack across thousands of miles. And he had been chained in the Iron Root Bastion's dungeons for 5 months. "How?" she managed. "How did they capture you?" Kavrin's expression darkened with something that looked like shame and rage combined. "Betrayal. One of my own advisors sold information to human mercenaries. They ambushed me during a border negotiation, used weapons specifically designed to suppress my transformation. By the time I realized what was happening, they had me in silver chains." His hands clenched into fists. "I stayed in wolf form to protect my people. If these humans knew they held the Alpha King, they would have used me as a hostage, would have demanded concessions, territory, perhaps even declared war. I chose to be a nameless prisoner rather than put my kingdom at risk." "But the dreams," Marin whispered. "The forest. You speaking to me. How?" "The fated bond." Kavrin's voice softened, and he looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Every alpha has one somewhere in the world. A soul chosen by the moon goddess herself to stand beside us, to complete us. I have lived for nearly 3 centuries and never found mine. Until you descended those stairs with fear in your eyes and compassion in your heart." Marin shook her head, overwhelmed. "That's not possible. I'm human. I'm nobody. I work in a kitchen and I have no family and no power and—" "You saved an Alpha King." Kavrin's words cut through her panic like a blade. "You showed mercy when you could have shown cruelty. You risked yourself to ease the suffering of a creature you were taught to fear. You are not nobody, Marin Eloan. You are the other half of my soul, and the bond allowed me to reach you in your dreams, to show you who I truly was, to prepare you for this moment." "I don't believe in fate," Marin said, but her voice trembled with uncertainty. "Then believe in this." Kavrin extended one hand toward her, palm up, his amber eyes never leaving hers. "Believe that I am grateful, that your kindness gave me the strength to hold on when the silver burned my flesh and my spirit alike, that your courage broke chains forged in moonlight and blessed by human priests. You freed the Alpha King, Marin. Whether you believe in fate or not, you cannot undo what you have done." Marin stared at his outstretched hand, at the burns marking his wrist where the chains had held him. She should be terrified, should be screaming for the guards, should be doing anything except feeling this pull toward him, this overwhelming certainty that everything he said was true. Before she could respond, Kavrin's expression shifted. His eyes went unfocused and his body swayed dangerously. Kavrin! Marin lunged forward instinctively, catching him as he collapsed. His weight was substantial even in his weakened state, but she managed to lower him carefully to the stone floor. Kavrin, stay with me. The transformation, he breathed, his eyes struggling to focus on her face. Cost too much. 5 months of silver poisoning. I need time to heal. You don't have time. Marin's voice broke with desperation. They're executing you in 2 days. Dawn. They're going to bring you to the courtyard and kill you in front of the entire fortress. Kavrin's lips curved into a weak smile. Then we have a problem, little healer. Marin looked down at the Alpha King collapsed in her arms, at the shattered chains scattered across the cell, at the impossible situation that had just become infinitely more complicated. They would come for him tomorrow to prepare him for the execution. They would find the cell empty or find a man instead of a wolf, and either way they would kill him, unless she stopped them. I won't let them kill you, Marin whispered fiercely, surprised by the steel in her own voice. You saved yourself from the chains, Kavrin Thorn. Now let me save you from what comes next. His amber eyes met hers, and in them she saw trust. Complete and absolute trust that she had no idea if she deserved. But she would not let him down. As Kavrin's breathing deepened into unconsciousness, as the enormity of what she was about to attempt crashed over her, Marin Eloan made her choice. She would get the Alpha King out of this fortress, or she would die trying. Marin left Kavrin sleeping in the cell and climbed the dungeon stairs with her mind racing through everything she would need. A plan was forming, desperate and dangerous, but it was the only chance they had. The fortress was settling into its evening routine, soldiers changing shifts, kitchen workers cleaning up after dinner. Marin moved through the corridors with her head down, drawing on years of being invisible to navigate unseen. She knew every storage room, every supply closet, every place where things were kept and forgotten. Her first stop was the laundry where uniforms waited to be distributed to new recruits. Her hands shook as she selected a set that might fit Kavrin's broad frame, bundling it quickly into her apron. Next came the armory storage, where she risked everything to steal a soldier's traveling cloak and a belt. From the infirmary, she took bandages and what few healing supplies remained in her personal stores. Every moment felt like an eternity. Every footstep in the hallway made her freeze, certain she would be discovered. But somehow, impossibly, she made it back to the dungeons without being stopped. Kavrin was awake when she returned, sitting with his back against the stone wall. He looked slightly stronger, though the burns still marked his skin and exhaustion shadowed his eyes. When he saw her, something like relief crossed his face. I was afraid you had reconsidered, he said quietly. We don't have time for reconsideration. Marin thrust the bundle of clothing at him. Put these on. We leave tonight, before they come to prepare you for tomorrow's execution. Kavrin's eyebrows rose as he examined the soldier's uniform. Clever little healer. But I am not certain I can pass for human, even in disguise. You'll have to try. Marin turned her back to give him privacy as he dressed, though she could hear him moving stiffly, his breath catching with pain. The night shift is minimal. If we move carefully, we might reach the eastern gate before anyone realizes you're missing. And if we are caught, Marin's hands clenched into fists. Then I suppose we die together. There was a long pause. Then Kavrin's voice, rough with emotion. You would risk your life for mine. After everything you have been taught about my kind. You are not your kind, Marin said softly. You are Kavrin, and I cannot let them kill you. When she turned back around, Kavrin stood in the ill-fitting uniform, the cloak wrapped around his shoulders to hide the worst of his burns. He looked almost human, if one did not notice the predatory grace in how he moved or the otherworldly intensity of his amber eyes. Can you walk? Marin asked. Kavrin took a step and nearly stumbled. Immediately, Marin was at his side, her shoulder sliding under his arm to support his weight. He was heavy, his body still weak from months of silver poisoning, but she braced herself and held firm. "Lean on me," she whispered. "We are just an injured soldier and a kitchen worker helping him to the infirmary. Nothing suspicious." They moved through the dungeon corridors together, each step carefully measured. Kavrin's breathing was labored, but he matched her pace. His arm around her shoulders both a necessity and something that felt strangely right. As if they had walked this way 1,000 times before. The dungeons gave way to the lower corridors of the fortress. Here, torches burned in their sconces and voices echoed from the guard stations. Marin's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her head down and her pace steady. Just a kitchen worker. Just helping someone. Nothing to see. They were halfway across the main hall when disaster struck. "You there! Stop!" 2 soldiers stepped into their path, hands on their sword hilts. Marin's blood turned to ice, but she forced herself to keep her expression neutral. "Sir," she said, injecting her voice with the deference expected from someone of her station. The taller soldier's eyes narrowed as he studied Kavrin's face. "I don't recognize this man. What unit is he from?" Marin's mind raced. "He was injured during training exercises, sir. I'm taking him to the infirmary for treatment before the morning shift." "Training exercises." The soldier stepped closer, suspicion written plainly across his face. "At this hour? And why are you taking him instead of his squad mates?" "They were needed elsewhere, sir. I was asked to help because—" "Let me see his face." The soldier reached for Kavrin's hood. Kavrin's entire body tensed beneath Marin's arm. She felt the change in him, felt the predator awakening despite his weakness. In another second, he would attack, would reveal himself, and they would both die in this hallway. But before either soldier could touch him, before Kavrin could move, something extraordinary happened. Kavrin lifted his head and spoke a single command. "Let us pass." His voice rolled through the hallway like distant thunder, carrying a weight and power that had nothing to do with volume. It was the voice of an alpha, layered with centuries of authority, infused with magic that had survived 5 months of silver suppression. It bypassed rational thought and struck directly at the primal part of the human brain that recognized apex predators and instinctively submitted. The soldiers froze mid-motion, their eyes glazing over slightly. For a heartbeat, they stood perfectly still, caught in the compulsion of that voice. "Move," Marin whispered urgently, and they stumbled forward together. The soldiers remained frozen as Marin and Kavrin passed them, still locked in the grip of Kavrin's command. But Marin knew it would not last long. Already she could see awareness beginning to creep back into their expressions. "Faster," Kavrin breathed, though she could feel him trembling with the effort of maintaining their pace. They made it around the corner just as shouts erupted behind them. "Alarm! The prisoner has escaped. Lock down the fortress." The sound of running boots echoed through the corridors. Bells began to ring, their harsh clanging signaling that every soldier in the Iron Root Bastion was about to mobilize. "The eastern gate," Marin gasped, trying to support Kavrin's increasing weight as his strength failed. "We have to reach it before." The grinding sound of metal on stone filled the air. Through the windows, Marin could see the massive fortress gates beginning to close, soldiers rushing to seal every exit. They were not going to make it. "Marin." Kavrin's voice was strained. "I am going to fall. When I do, run. Do not look back. Tell them I forced you to help me. They might show you mercy." "Absolutely not. You cannot carry me much further." "Then you're going to have to carry me." Before Kavrin could protest, before the weakness could claim him entirely, Marin made a decision that defied all logic. She stopped in the middle of the corridor, turned to face him, and pressed both hands to his chest. "My mother was a healer," Marin said quietly. "Before the border conflict killed her, she taught me everything she knew about herbs and medicines. I was only 10, but I remember her hands. How gentle they were. How people trusted her. She would be proud of you." Marin's hands stilled on the bandages. "She would think I had lost my mind." running away with a werewolf, helping an escaped prisoner, abandoning the only home I have known for 15 years. Do you regret it? Maren looked up to find Kavrin watching her with those intense amber eyes. In the firelight, his features seemed carved from shadow and gold, beautiful and dangerous and utterly inhuman. No, she whispered. I do not regret it at all. Something shifted in Kavrin's expression, a hunger that made Maren's breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might close the distance between them, might pull her into his arms the way she had caught herself wanting more and more often. But instead, Kavrin turned away, his jaw tight with restraint. You should rest, he said, his voice rougher than usual. We have many more days of travel ahead. Maren lay down near the fire, but sleep was slow to come. She found herself watching Kavrin as he kept first watch, studying the strong lines of his profile, the way moonlight caught in his black and silver hair. When had she started seeing him not as a wolf or a king, but simply as a man? A man who made her heart race and her skin warm and her thoughts drift to dangerous possibilities. She was falling for him. The realization should have terrified her, but instead it felt inevitable, like something that had been written in the stars long before she was born. On the 5th day of their journey, the threats they had been anticipating finally materialized. Maren was gathering wild rosemary near a stream when she heard voices echoing through the trees. Human voices, speaking in the clipped tones of military discipline. The tracks lead this way. The escaped prisoner and his accomplice cannot be far. Fortress hunters. They had been followed. Maren froze, her heart hammering. She was too far from their camp to call for Kavrin without alerting the soldiers. Slowly, carefully, she began backing toward the cover of the trees. A hand clamped over her mouth. Maren's scream died in her throat as she was dragged backward. But instead of a soldier's grip, she felt Kavrin's familiar presence, smelled the wild scent of him. Do not make a sound, he breathed against her ear. They crouched together in the underbrush as 3 soldiers passed within feet of their hiding place, close enough that Maren could see the fortress insignia on their uniforms. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but Kavrin's arm around her waist was steady, grounding. The soldiers moved past, their voices fading into the distance. But their troubles were far from over. That night, as they huddled around a carefully concealed fire, Kavrin went absolutely still. His head tilted, listening to something Maren could not hear. We are being hunted, he said quietly. But not by humans. What do you mean? Before Kavrin could answer, a howl split the night air. Then another. And another. A chorus of wolf voices rising from the darkness, surrounding their small camp. Maren saw them emerging from the shadows. Wolves, but not like Kavrin. These were smaller, their eyes reflecting the firelight with a feral gleam that promised violence. Rogue lichens. Kavrin had told her about them during their travels. Wolves who had abandoned their packs, who lived outside the laws of lichen society. Stay behind me, Kavrin commanded, rising to his feet. There are too many of them. You are still not fully healed. I said stay behind me. 6 wolves circled their camp, lips pulled back from gleaming fangs. The largest, a scarred brute with one torn ear, fixed his gaze on Maren. The human smells of the alpha, the wolf growled, and Maren realized with shock that she could understand him. Is this your mate, exile? Did you fall so far as to bond with prey? I am no exile, Kavrin said, his voice carrying that unmistakable note of command. And you will address me with the respect due to your king. The scarred wolf laughed, a sound like breaking bones. You are no king. Just another wolf who thinks he can protect a weak human. We will enjoy her screams. He lunged. Maren saw it happen as if time had slowed. The massive wolf launching himself through the air, jaws open, aimed directly at her throat. Kavrin's roar of rage. And then the world exploded into magic and violence. Kavrin's transformation was not complete this time, but something in between. His body expanded, bones cracking and reforming partially, fur rippling across his skin in patches. His hands became claws, his teeth elongated into fangs. His eyes blazed with pure golden fire. He caught the attacking wolf mid-leap and slammed him into the ground with such force that Maren felt the earth shake. The other rogues hesitated, clearly not expecting this level of power. "You will bow," Kavrin snarled, his voice distorted by the partial shift, "or you will die." The scarred wolf tried to rise, tried to attack again. Kavrin's clawed hand closed around his throat. "I am Kavrin Thorn, Alpha King of the Silvercrest Dominion. And this woman is under my protection. Touch her and I will scatter your remains across these woods as a warning to any other rogue who forgets that an alpha's mate is sacred." The remaining wolves dropped to their bellies in submission, whimpering. Kavrin released the scarred wolf, who scrambled away with his tail between his legs. The pack fled into the darkness, leaving Maren and Kavrin alone in the sudden silence. Kavrin stood there breathing hard, his body slowly shifting back to human form. When he finally turned to look at Maren, his eyes were still glowing amber. "Are you hurt?" Maren shook her head, unable to speak. She had just watched Kavrin defend her with a ferocity that should have terrified her. Instead she felt safe, protected, cherished. "Kavrin," she whispered, and suddenly she was moving, crossing the distance between them and throwing her arms around his neck. He caught her instantly, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her close. They stood like that for a long moment, hearts pounding in unison, the bond between them thrumming with power. "You called me your mate," Maren said against his shoulder. "I did." Kavrin's voice was rough. "The bond makes it truth, whether we have completed the claiming ritual or not. In the eyes of Lekan law, you are mine, Maren. And I will kill anyone who tries to harm you." 3 more days of travel brought them finally to the border of the Silvercrest Dominion. Maren knew they had crossed into Lekan territory when Kavrin's entire demeanor changed. His shoulders straightened, his movements became more confident, and something like relief crossed his face. "We are close now," he said. "My people patrol these woods. We should encounter them soon. Will they be friendly? To their king? Always." But Kavrin's expression clouded slightly. "Though I have been gone for 5 months, there may be questions." The patrol found them before sunset, 4 massive wolves who materialized from the forest like shadows given form. They froze when they saw Kavrin, their ears flattening in confusion. One of them shifted to human form, a young man with dark hair and suspicious eyes. "Who are you to trespass in the Silvercrest Dominion? State your business, or is that any way to greet your king?" Kavrin's voice carried absolute authority. The young man's eyes widened. "That is impossible. Our king has been missing for 5 months. Presumed dead. You are just some human-smelling stranger. Then let me refresh your memory." Kavrin's transformation was swift and complete this time. One moment he stood as a man, the next a massive ash-gray wolf with amber eyes stood in his place. But more than his appearance, it was the aura of power radiating from him that left no doubt. This was an alpha. This was their king. The patrol wolves dropped to their bellies instantly, whimpering in submission. The young man fell to his knees. "Alpha King," he gasped. "Forgive me, I did not recognize." Kavrin shifted back to human form. "There is nothing to forgive. Gather your pack. Send word to the Silvercrest Palace that their king has returned. And send word that he does not return alone." The young man's eyes flicked to Maren, widening further. "My lord, is she?" "Mine," Kavrin said simply. "My fated mate. And anyone who questions her place at my side will answer to me personally." The patrol leader threw back his head and released a howl that echoed through the entire forest. Within moments, answering howls rose from every direction, a symphony of wolf voices celebrating their king's return. Kavrin turned to Maren, extending his hand. "Are you ready, little healer? Once we cross into my kingdom, once we reach my throne, there will be no going back. You will be known as the Alpha King's mate. Your life will never be the same." Maren looked at his outstretched hand, at the amber eyes watching her with a mixture of hope and hunger. Behind him, the forest echoed with the howls of his people. Ahead lay a world she had been taught to fear her entire life. But Kavrin was there, and somehow that made everything else seem possible. She placed her hand in his. "When we reach your throne," Kavrin said softly, his fingers intertwining with hers, "they will know you are mine. All of my kingdom will know that the Alpha King has claimed his mate. Are you prepared for that?" Maren's heart raced, but not with fear. With anticipation. With certainty. With something that felt dangerously close to love. "I am prepared," she whispered. And together, they walked into the Silvercrest Dominion, into a future neither of them could have imagined, bound by a fate that had begun with mercy in a dungeon and would end with a love that would unite two worlds. The Silvercrest Palace rose from the forest like a crown of stone and moonlight, its towers reaching toward the sky as if trying to touch the stars themselves. It was built into the mountain itself, a fortress that seemed to grow organically from the living rock, decorated with carvings of wolves and ancient symbols that predated human civilization. As Kavrin and Maren approached with their escort, the word of the Alpha King's return spread like wildfire through the Leaken population. Wolves emerged from the forest in their hundreds, shifting to human form to line the path leading to the palace gates. Their voices rose in a deafening roar of welcome, of joy, of relief that their king lived. Maren walked beside Kavrin, her hand firmly clasped in his, trying not to be overwhelmed by the sheer number of eyes watching her. She could feel their curiosity, their confusion, their suspicion. A human walking hand in hand with their Alpha King. It was unprecedented. Impossible. Revolutionary. Kavrin's grip on her hand tightened as if sensing her nervousness. "Stay close to me," he murmured. "No matter what happens next." They climbed the palace steps together, and Maren felt Kavrin's body begin to tremble. The journey had cost him more than he had let on, his strength finally reaching its limit. When they reached the top of the stairs, his legs buckled. Maren was there instantly, her arms wrapping around him, supporting his weight despite the gasps from the watching crowd. An Alpha King showing weakness, a human woman holding him up. It violated every expectation, every tradition. "I have you," Maren whispered fiercely. "Lean on me, Kavrin. I will not let you fall." Kavrin's amber eyes met hers, and in them she saw gratitude and something deeper. Love, perhaps, or the beginning of it. "My queen," he murmured, so quietly that only she could hear. Together they entered the palace. The throne room was vast and magnificent, its walls carved with the history of the Leaken clans, its floor inlaid with silver that caught the light from hundreds of torches. Lycans in human form filled the space, all turning to watch as their king entered with a stranger at his side. At the far end of the room, near the empty throne, stood a man with iron-gray hair and calculating eyes. He stepped forward with a smile that did not reach those eyes. "My king," he said, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. "We had feared the worst. 5 months without word, without any sign of your survival. The kingdom has been in mourning. Have they, Aldrich?" Kavrin's voice was cold as winter ice. "Or have you been preparing to claim my throne in my absence?" The man, Aldrich, had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I merely served as regent, ensuring the kingdom's stability during this crisis. Surely you cannot fault me for. You sold me to humans." Kavrin's words cut through the air like a blade. "You arranged my ambush. You gave them the locations of my patrols, the weaknesses in my guard. You are the reason I spent 5 months in silver chains, Aldrich. The only question is why." Gasps echoed through the throne room. Aldrich's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You have no proof of these accusations. I have the testimony of the mercenaries who captured me. I have the letters you wrote, found among their belongings. And I have the word of my wolf, who recognized your scent on the weapons they used." Kavrin took a step forward, and despite his weakness, the pure authority radiating from him made Aldrich stumble backward. "You betrayed your alpha. You betrayed your king. Give me one reason why I should not tear out your throat where you stand." The throne room held its breath. Maren watched Kavrin's hands clench into fists, saw the rage burning in his amber eyes. This was justice. This was deserved. No one would question an alpha king executing his betrayer. But Maren also saw something else in Kavrin's face. Uncertainty. A war between the king who demanded blood and the man who had learned mercy from a woman who fed a chained wolf. Maren stepped forward and placed her hand gently on Kavrin's arm. 5 months in chains, she said softly, speaking only to him though the entire room could hear. 5 months of torture, of silver burns, of slow death. And you survived because you chose to endure rather than put your people at risk. You chose to suffer rather than let them use you as a weapon against your kingdom. She looked into his eyes. You are stronger than your rage, Kavrin. You are better than the revenge you are entitled to. Kavrin stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Then he turned back to Aldrich. You are banished from the Silver Crest Dominion, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You will leave within the hour, taking nothing with you but the clothes you wear. If you ever set foot in my territory again, if you ever threaten my people or my mate, I will not show you this mercy a second time. Now get out of my sight. Aldrich opened his mouth to protest, but the guards were already moving, dragging him from the throne room. His shouts of outrage faded as the doors closed behind him. Kavrin stood in the center of his throne room, breathing hard, his entire body trembling with the effort of restraint. Maren stayed at his side, her hand still on his arm, anchoring him. You should have killed him, someone said from the crowd. He deserved death for his betrayal. Perhaps, Kavrin said quietly. But I have learned that mercy can be as powerful as vengeance. And I choose to be the kind of king who offers it, even when it costs me. The throne room erupted into discussion, voices rising in argument and debate. But one voice cut through the chaos, sharp and hostile. And what of the human? An elderly woman stepped forward, her gray hair braided with silver, her eyes hard as flint. You bring a human into our sacred palace, you call her your mate, but she is not one of us. She can never be one of us. The Alpha King cannot bond with prey, my lord. It violates every law we have. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Maren felt her stomach drop, felt the hostility directed at her like physical blows. She did not belong here. She was an outsider, an intruder. Kavrin's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close to his side. This woman saved my life, he said, his voice ringing through the throne room with undeniable power. When I was chained and dying, when every Leakin in this kingdom believed me lost, she showed me mercy. She risked her own life to heal my wounds, to ease my suffering, to give me hope when I had none. And when I finally broke free of my chains, she helped me escape from a fortress full of soldiers who wanted me dead. His amber eyes swept across the assembled Lycans. Maren Eloan is my fated mate. The bond was chosen by the moon goddess herself. Not by me, not by her. To reject her is to reject the will of the goddess. Is there anyone here who dares to question that divine choice? Silence fell. The elderly woman's expression softened slightly. The bond is sacred, my lord. If the moon goddess truly chose her for you, then we will honor that choice. But she must prove herself worthy of standing beside you. She must show that she can be a queen to our people, not just a mate to our king. Then let her prove it, Kavrin said. Over the following days, Maren threw herself into the work of earning the Lycan's trust. She established a healing house in the palace, using her knowledge of herbs and medicine to treat the sick and injured. When warriors returned from patrols with wounds, it was Maren who tended them with gentle hands. When children fell ill, it was Maren who sat at their bedsides through the night. She made no distinction between Leakin and human in her care, treating all suffering as equally worthy of compassion. And slowly, gradually, the hostility in the Lycan's eyes began to shift to something else. Respect, gratitude, acceptance. Maren found herself growing to love these people who had been strangers just weeks ago. Their strength, their loyalty, their fierce devotion to family and pack. They were not the monsters she had been taught to fear. They were people, complex and flawed and beautiful in their own way. And through it all, Kavrin watched her with pride and something deeper burning in his amber eyes. On the night of the full moon, 2 weeks after their arrival, Kavrin came to Maren's chambers. He wore formal robes marked with the symbols of his kingship, but his feet were bare and his hair unbound, falling past his shoulders in waves of black and silver. "The moon is full," he said quietly. "It is the traditional time for claiming ceremonies. If you are ready, if you are certain, I would bind myself to you before my entire kingdom tonight." Maren's heart raced. "And if I am not certain?" Kavrin's expression softened. "Then we wait. I will not pressure you, Maren. The bond exists whether we complete the ceremony or not. You are already mine in every way that matters. But the claiming ritual makes it official in the eyes of Leaken law. It declares to the world that you are my queen." Maren crossed the room to stand before him. She reached up to cup his face in her hands, feeling the strength in his jaw, the warmth of his skin. "I am certain," she whispered. "I was certain the moment I chose to unlock your cell. Maybe even before that. Maybe from the first time our eyes met and I saw past the wolf to the soul beneath." Kavrin's eyes closed briefly, as if her words caused him physical pain. When he opened them again, they blazed with golden fire. "I have lived for nearly 3 centuries, he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have commanded armies, ruled kingdoms, survived wars and betrayals and losses that should have broken me. But nothing in all those years prepared me for you. For the way you looked at me with compassion when everyone else saw only a monster. For the courage it took to defy everything you had been taught and show mercy to your enemy. You saved more than my life, Maren. You saved my soul." He took her hand and led her to the palace balcony where the full moon hung huge and silver in the night sky. Below, the entire Leaken kingdom had gathered, thousands of wolves in human form watching with solemn faces. Kavrin turned to face Maren, still holding her hand. "Before the moon goddess and my people, I claim you as my fated mate," he said, his voice carrying through the silent night. "I claim your courage, your compassion, your strength. I claim your past and your future. I claim the right to stand beside you, to protect you, to love you for all the days of my existence." He raised their joined hands, and Maren felt magic beginning to build between them. It started as a warmth in her palm, then spread up her arm, wrapping around her heart like golden threads. "Do you accept this claim?" Kavrin asked, his amber eyes searching hers. "I do," Maren said clearly. "I accept your claim. And I claim you in return, Kavrin Thorn. I claim your honor, your loyalty, your heart. I claim the right to stand beside you not as a servant or a subject, but as your equal, your partner, your mate." The magic exploded between them like a supernova. Maren gasped as she felt it sinking into her skin, marking her in ways that went deeper than flesh. Golden light wrapped around both of them, visible to everyone watching, declaring the bond for all to see. When it finally faded, Maren looked down to see a mark on her inner wrist, an intricate symbol that seemed to shift and change in the moonlight, part wolf, part moon, part something entirely unique. Kavrin had a matching mark on his own wrist. "It is done," he said softly. "You are mine and I am yours. For all time." The Leaken kingdom erupted into howls of celebration, the sound rising to the moon like a prayer of joy. Kavrin pulled Maren into his arms, holding her close as if he would never let go. "My queen," he whispered against her hair. "My heart, my mate, my king," Maren whispered back, tears streaming down her face. "My fate, my love." In the weeks that followed, the story of the Alpha King and his human mate spread across the entire realm. It became legend. The tale of a woman who showed mercy to a chained wolf, and a king who learned that compassion could be stronger than any chain forged in silver or moonlight. Maren stood on the palace balcony beside Kavrin, watching the sun rise over the Silvercrest Dominion. In the distance, she could see humans and lichens beginning to trade at the border markets, the first tentative steps toward a peace that had seemed impossible just months ago. "You changed everything," Kavran said, wrapping his arm around her waist. "One act of kindness, and you reshaped 2 worlds." Maren leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her back. "We changed everything. Together." And it was true. The human kingdoms had sent envoys seeking treaties. The Lichen clans spoke of the Alpha King's mate with respect and admiration. A woman who had been nobody, an orphan working in a kitchen, had become a bridge between species that had been at war for generations. All because she had looked at a chained wolf and chosen to see suffering instead of a monster. All because she had offered mercy when the world demanded cruelty. Kavran turned her in his arms, his amber eyes soft with love as he looked down at her. "I spent 5 months in chains," he said quietly. 5 months of torture and despair. "But I would endure it all again if it meant finding you at the end. You are worth every moment of suffering, every burn, every ounce of pain. Because you gave me something I never thought I would have." "What is that?" "Hope. Love. A future where I am not just a king, but a man with someone to cherish. You gave me everything, Maren." Maren rose on her toes and kissed him softly. "And you gave me a destiny." As the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Maren reflected on the impossible journey that had brought her here. She had fed a chained wolf out of kindness, never knowing that simple act would change her life forever. And in return, the Alpha King had given her a destiny no chains could ever hold. A destiny of love, of purpose, of standing beside the most powerful being in the realm not as his subject, but as his equal, his partner, his queen. She had saved a wolf. And a king had claimed her heart. And together, they would build a future where mercy mattered more than fear, where compassion was stronger than hatred, where a human woman and an Alpha King could stand united and show 2 worlds that love could bridge any divide. The chains were broken. And their story had only just begun.